Are we about ready?
I don't have one of those.
You can. Is that everybody? We missing anybody? Y'all like my chair? Hey, I just need y'all to know, and there's some people in this room that know, there's a lot of ministry that's happened in this chair. This chair used to be in my office. There's been a lot of tears in this chair, and it's hideous, but it's pretty comfortable. So, and that one matched for y'all too, so I get the big flower chair. Greg said I should use it. So, yeah, nobody believes that. Zach is in front of a bunch of people expected to talk right now, so his shoulders are like this. All right, so like I said, the reason that I asked Zach and Megan to come do this is because honestly, if you told me their story 10 years ago, I would have thought they made it up in a lot of ways. And I hope, at least for those of you who have been here for a while, that they have shown themselves of good rapport enough to where you can trust their testimony on some things that may be a little bit outside of what you've experienced or know. But they've been through a lot over the past, 8 years that we've been friends? That's about the time. I mean, it started before we became friends, but it was right about the time we became friends too. So, okay. Me and Maegan have a very unique relationship, by the way. So I just want to kind of start. There's a lot of story we could go into. I want to kind of keep it somewhat brief, not too brief, but I think talking to you guys earlier, we kind of want to start back at the beginning of marriage. Okay, so kind of lay the framework for us of where you were with each other, your faith, kind of what happened in those early years of marriage that you feel like have kind of over time shown to be parts of the spiritual warfare aspect of your life.
So I think it's important to start with just, how you were talking about how, individually it's important to make sure that you're vigilant in spiritual warfare. But I think us as a couple, like our beginning in marriage, but even just, in dating and everything, like we were the most, what's the opposite of vigilant? Not vigilant. We were the most not vigilant. We were the most not vigilant. We were the most naive individuals. I mean, like you get into your dating life and you have all these hopes and dreams and expectations, and then you get married and it's beautiful and perfect, and you have again all these dreams and expectations, and the last thing you're thinking about is all of the bad things that could happen. And so that's kind of where I think it's important to start, like going into life together. We were just together, naive, individually, yes, but as a couple, just completely amiss to the things that were going on around us.
You used to have a saying about that, right? A saying you lived by in college?
No bad days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to hold that up so they can hear you.
I'm not used to not singing into it.
Yeah.
For me and Megan, our relationship started in college. I met Megan, and she was dating a guy. We were friends. I want to try to get to the point here. We were friends. They broke up. Me and her started dating, and about 6 months later, I left for Marine Corps boot camp. So our relationship was very brief as far as face-to-face, because from the second that I left, we really didn't see each other consistently for another year after that, and then I got orders to Okinawa, Japan, and then that was 2 years there. And so right before I left for Okinawa, we got engaged, right? And so a few months of seeing each other face-to-face and dating, then we're gone, then we're engaged, and then I'm gone again, right? And then we legally got married after a year of that. And then once I rotated back home, we had our wedding ceremony. So you take 3 years of a relationship, and only a few months of that was us face-to-face. So we were married, and I snatched her up, went up to North Carolina, and, we really didn't know each other. So if you take, like, that part of our relationship of not knowing each other, having to really just start dating now that we're legally married, and I've moved her away from her entire family, you take that on top of the fact that neither one of us was following the Lord at all at that point in time,
I mean, like we knew
it can
him.
be kind of a storm.
We knew him. We knew him, right? We believed in him. But yeah, I mean, you said it. We weren't following him. Yeah, you said it.
I'll be straight up until when I started coming to Hope Church, and things started to become more real for me. Like if I would have died, I would have went to hell. Like that, I was not following the Lord. I did not have His saving grace. I did not have salvation. So, just want to make that very clear.
Maegan wants to hold on to that for herself.
Yeah. So that just to give you some context of kind of where we were at.
Yeah. So describe early marriage, some ways that you see. So maybe even before we met you guys, how had you started to see the spiritual warfare? Where was the enemy kind of showing his head? What are some things that were coming to the front in your marriage early on?
That we saw back then, or looking back?
Well, looking back or even experienced them, maybe you didn't realize it was spiritual warfare at the time.
Yeah, again, totally aloof. I did not understand it was spiritual warfare. I did not know that was even a concept. But I will tell you this. I think I packed my bags like once a week when we were married. That first year of marriage, I legit packed my bag. Like I had a suitcase ready to go. Like I was just like 1 foot out of the door. And so if that's not spiritual warfare, that explains that pretty well.
Yeah.
Well, and for me, I lived and was kind of shaped by a very, intense culture, a culture that encouraged anger, encouraged you to like channel that anger for some sort of benefit, and that was kind of the whole culture that was built around. So there's that, and then I developed a very significant porn addiction when I was in Okinawa, Japan. So you take that on top of a culture that encourages anger, frustration, that encourages you to like own this kind of violent nature on top of like that sort of addiction, that can kind of give you an idea. A lot of screaming, a lot of yelling, like she's saying. She had 1 foot out the door.
Lots of holes in the walls.
Yeah, I put lots of holes in lots of walls. It was. You kind of chuckle, and like we can kind of look back and sort of chuckle, but honestly, like it sucked. Like it was not good at all. And it was a very exhausting, adversarial relationship that we had. That was early marriage, really, all the way, well, for a while.
Yeah. So what we're kind of seeing right now, because this sounds like a lot of what a lot of people experience. This sounds like life for a lot of people. Much of the world has accepted this as just life. They don't realize this is not God's intent. They don't realize this is not God's desire. God's desire is not for a husband and wife to be divided in that way. It's not for Zach to be angry all the time and unable to control it. It's not for Maegan to be wanting to leave her husband all the time. Like none of those things are of God's design, and yet the enemy is, and you can imagine being in their shoes. I don't know this as a real situation, but imagine Maegan being at home alone while he's off working, and she's just constantly like, I just got to leave. I'm just going to leave. This is going to be the best. I'm so sick and like, that's the enemy. He's literally like whispering in her ear, you need to go. You need to do this because this is what you should do for you. And same thing with Zach, like him festering and just getting more and more angry about things over time and then snapping, like that's the enemy, right? That's spiritual warfare. That is not God's design for his people. And so when we know it's not God's design for his people, we have to ask, where does it come from? Okay? So let's kind of keep moving through the story. Things kind of came to a head shortly after we got to know you guys. As much as you're comfortable, again, I have not asked them to share everything tonight, but
We're going all in.
Okay, well, as much as you're comfortable, share kind of when things started to really just go wrong and you started to realize this is not normal, this is not okay. Like how we get to that point.
So when me and Megan first got married, the thing that I had always known was like I wanted to be a dad. Like I always wanted to be a dad. And so we got married, and you know, I take Megan away from her family, so like children were not really a discussion that we had until we got back to Carrollton. You know, I got out, we moved back to Carrollton. Not long, I mean, months later, we met and we started coming to church here. And I think that we, for the first time since we got out, since we got out of the Marine Corps, like I started making new friends. Like I reconnected with some old friends, you know, met Blake and Brianna, and we had, you know, met this group of people that we could do life with. And it was like things started to settle down. So it was like we were never like trying not to have kids, if that makes sense. We just ain't, you know, got there yet.
Just practicing.
Yeah, just practicing. But it was like once we kind of met Blake and Brianna, we started hanging out with Dawson and Peyton, and we had that group of friends. We were like, we want to have a kid. We want to start a family. And so it was like months and months and months of this, and like, you know, it wasn't happening for us, and we were confused and angry and a little bit frustrated. And then on top of that, all of a sudden, Blake and Brianna got pregnant with Brantley. Dawson and Peyton got pregnant with Evie. My cousin got pregnant. It was like everybody in the world got pregnant. And we were standing there, you know, with our hands up like, what is going on? And then, you know, it happened. We got pregnant. And so it was super exciting, and we were like, man, we're all going to have, like, our kid together, like, our first kid together, and, like, this whole, like, it's like things haven't happened. You already start creating memories, you know? And so very exciting time. And then 10 weeks later, me and Megan went for a doctor visit, and there was no heartbeat. And so, like, our dream of having our first kid, that kind of stopped dead in its tracks. I didn't mean to say that way. But it just kind of stopped. And that's where things like really started to kind of spiral for us.
No, I think that's exactly right. That's kind of the point that we were already, you know, spiraling on this downward spiral, but I think that's what made it where we were now running down the spiral. For me, I think it was more just I had this false theology of God. And so when, in my heart of hearts, like I really thought like the Lord was like mad at me, or like I did something wrong. And so when that happened, because I didn't know him and because I didn't really know his love, I hated him. And I like didn't want to pray. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, and during all this time, you know, like I said, we had met Blake and Brianna. We were going to church here, like every Sunday. We were in church here. We were hearing Greg preach. We may have even started, maybe not full time, but had leading worship. You know, and you know, these things are still going on. Like we're still experiencing like incredible anger, confusion, frustration. The fights that we were having were still pretty severe, like and like verbally violent. So all these things are going on, and we're going to church, y'all. Like we're in here and we're worshiping. We're even leading worship sometimes, and like experiencing, you know, our own sinfulness, and then you throw this circumstance on top of that, and like it kind of just compounded everything pretty quickly.
Yeah. And again, like the world wants you to think that that's just what happens. That's not what happens by God's design, right? That is not of God's making of the human body for that to happen. And so I know we're kind of we're moving through this because, guys, this is, for my relationship with them, like 8 years of stuff that's gone on. y'all are just getting the tip of the iceberg of. To give from the outside perspective of Zach and Maegan in that time, it seemed as if the thing that was holding them together was this pursuit of a child. And you see that a lot in marriages. And you see that a lot why people get divorces when their children turn teenagers. Because the only thing holding them together was this child. And so everything else is bad, and they're united on pursuing this child. And the enemy takes that from them. And again, when this is something we'll talk more about later, we know now that in that the Lord is uncovering areas of our life that have to be sanctified, and He's going to use those things to make us more like Jesus. Those are incredibly painful times. You got something? Oh, I thought you. Okay. So in this time, I'm talking to you on the phone a lot, and Maegan's not talking to me. And
I hated
there's
everybody. I was very mean.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this against you, but I'm saying this so they realize, that's not a joke. She was mad at the world. And, from a friend's perspective, not that this is what this is about, but I remember us being on the outside being like, she's so mad, we don't even know what to do. We can't reach her at this point. We didn't know how to help you guys. And so this is continuing on. The anger, you have some highs and some lows, start to recover, kind of have some back steps. And then kind of before we get to that night where you called me over, give us a picture of kind of what led up to that moment. Maybe the interactions you guys had been having, how your marriage was like, kind of where you saw the enemy at work and what you're doing.
So when Zach went into boot camp, actually no, it was when he was in the Marine over in Okinawa, I actually ended up developing an eating disorder. It got pretty bad, but then once Zach came home, I was able to control it. And then I would go back, is it called remission, where you do it again?
Relapse, yeah.
Relapse. I had relapses when we were married that he didn't even know about, when we were in North Carolina that he didn't even know about. And then when we had our miscarriage, it went full force, and he never knew about it. It was full-on bulimic. And so he's not knowing any of this, but he'd be at work, and I'd be eating every meal and throwing them all up. I was in school, so I didn't really have a job, and so that's literally all I could do was just eat my feelings. And then because I'm such a control freak, I was just well, I can't gain weight, because then who's gonna love me then, right? So I'm just gonna purge it all. So that's what I would do. And in all of that, I was also so just focused on trying to have a child that I was looking at other means to get the child, going to these YouTube videos that would put off these certain sounds that were supposed to mimic some fertility god that would help you conceive a child. I was going to other means to try to find or to try to achieve having a child. Zach didn't know any of that either. So I was doing yoga. I was again listening to these chakras. I was had a friend that would come over and do the tarot cards or whatever. I mean, I was just whatever, God's not giving it to me, so I'll find another way. That's how bad it got. So eating disorder on top of having an idol of wanting to have a child, and actually looking at other gods essentially to try to do it.
And you're just still angry.
Yeah, this, that whole time for me was just kind of hanging on by a thread, really, because for me, again, I didn't know all these things were going on. I knew about the eating disorder when I was in Okinawa, but didn't know that she had been dealing with this currently. Didn't know that she was, doing meditations and looking at tarot cards, and like I didn't know any of this. Some of it I didn't know till recently, like past few months.
Really, about a month ago.
Yeah, like I didn't know any of this stuff was going on, and the reason I didn't is because we'll get to that later. But like I didn't know that any of this was going on. I was hanging on by a thread and just desperately like dragging Maegan, kicking and screaming to church every day to be around people that she just did not want to be around. And for me, it was because I was in the very early stages of like wanting, like being suicidal. Like for me, like divorce was never on the table, but our relationship was so unhealthy. I was like, this is the only way out. Like I can't divorce her because that's not an option, but I can do something else. And so like that was very early stages of that. And so like, as you can see, we're kind of like painting this picture of like our incredible sinful depravity on top of some other things, right? And so like you take all of those things into account, and then there's this other thing going on too that just kind of compounded everything. So like again, we're at church this whole time, and we started doing this men's retreat, Emmaus. And so Blake, that's where Blake and I met. We met at Emmaus, and I think this was the first time after we had gone through. It was the first time serving. It was the first time that we had served at it. And so what you don't know about is like you don't have any phones. Like you're not calling and texting people. You don't have a watch. Like it's really you're supposed to disconnect and just spend some time with the Lord. And I was able to do that weekend, and it was so good for me just in that fellowship with all the guys that I was with. And to be honest, like it was kind of like coming up for fresh air after like being just kind of weighed down by everything. And I was like honestly coming out of that super excited to just kind of tell Maegan like, hey, like this is good. This is really, really good. And like I want you to go and serve. I want you to experience this because I think it'll be good for us. And like that was my mind coming out of that weekend. So it was like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I pick up my phone and I'm getting ready to come home. Are we going here now? Like are we at that point?
Well, let me make a couple points here before we get to this where it all kind of came to a head. Are you guys seeing all the little footholds the enemy's getting along the way? He's getting it in the anger. He's getting it in the porn addiction. He's getting it in the self-image issues that stem back a long time. There are footholds that were put in Maegan's life that were not put there by Maegan, okay? Like that she's got some trauma of her own that have made her more culpable to these footholds. And so, like, you got to see all these little footholds lining up, and you're just spiraling. And a lot of people just think this is life. This is not God's design. And that's what you got to ask yourself when you're dealing with something. You're wondering if it's spiritual warfare. Is this God's design? And if it's not God's design, it's spiritual warfare. Now, that's not saying the Lord can't use spiritual warfare, but if it's not God's design, it's not how He created things. It's not ultimately what He would want. And so, yes, we can kind of go here. This is where, now, let me give a context for me. Remember, I grew up kind of cessationist, very cessationist, not into spiritual gifts, not into supernatural things, not into spiritual warfare. Had in recent years kind of come around like, okay, well, I'm reading the scriptures and I'm kind of not seeing my theology in here, so I should probably adjust my theology and make it line up with what the scriptures say. So very, very green in the idea of spiritual warfare. I have no idea why you called me, but you did. So Zach's coming home from Emmaus, and I get a call from you, I'm pretty sure, and you're just like laying out to me everything that had just happened. So, yeah. Like as you're on the way home, even.
Right. So, just to kind of, like Blake was saying, where he was at. For me, I grew up going to a Baptist church and then a Methodist church, and we didn't even say like Holy Spirit. It was like Holy Ghost. We didn't talk about spiritual gifts either. Like if you, I didn't even know what the word cessationist was. Like that was not in my vocabulary, so I wouldn't even be able to tell you what that meant. for me, it was just like, do what the Bible says, be good. And like, that was the extent of my biblical knowledge. That was the extent of my understanding of spiritual warfare, was like, you're sinful and you figure it out, That was basically what I understood. So, but yeah, leaving Emmaus, I picked up my phone for the first time that weekend and wanted to call Maegan and tell her how good the whole weekend was. And so I called Maegan, and instantly, it's just, where are you at, And I'm not going to like put words in her mouth tonight or anything like that, but it was instantly, as soon as I picked up the phone, she wanted to know why I hadn't called her yet. She wanted to know how long it was going to be before I got home. She was just already frustrated and angry that, like, number one, she hadn't heard from me, and probably because I didn't communicate that I wasn't going to be talking to her all week, and I didn't make that very clear, but, she wanted to know where I was at, what I was doing, why I wasn't home yet. And the one thing I will say that I do remember is, like, she told me, like, well, you just wait till you get home. And I was like, oh, man.
So, Maegan, like, what was, because this is really something we haven't talked about. What was your experience like that weekend? Like, what was going through your mind that weekend?
I mean, I think I was just angry, like, the whole time. I was left alone to my own devices, but again, because of the eating disorder, I kind of was like excited that he was going to be gone, because it meant I could just indulge and not have to worry about him trying to cover it up. So I do remember that specifically. I was again just like so consumed with just trying to avoid all of the things, like all of the feelings that I was feeling, except for anger. I was comfortable with anger, so I just was angry. And I also remember having this like FOMO, like he was getting to go do things and I was left alone. And then for him to actually enjoy it, I was like mad that he enjoyed it because I wasn't there. So again, this is BC Maegan, okay? I was just resentful for him that he enjoyed being away from me.
Yeah, so you can pick back up where you were. I just wanted to make sure they kind of heard her part of the story. So you get these calls, just wait till you get home.
Yeah, and I to be honest, I don't remember too much of the conversation, but I did call, I think I called Blake on the way home and was just telling him, like, because we'd had plenty of these conversations where, like, Blake was the person I called, and I would just tell him, like, man, I'm struggling. I don't know how to respond to this. I don't know what to do. But either way, I make it home, and I'm just dreading it the whole way there, because this is not the first time we had an interaction. Like, I knew what was going to happen when I got home. It was no surprise. I probably could have told you, how that was going to go. And so, like, I go in there already defeated. Like, I wasn't praying for my wife. I wasn't, worshiping on the way home. I wasn't doing anything to gird myself up or cover her in the word and cover her up in prayer and any of that. I was just dreading it, and I was already defeated. And so I walk in. Y'all are going to see me cry, by the way, just warning you right now. So I walk in, and, in our house, you walk in through the basement and go up the stairs, and when you walk up through the stairs, you would go into the kitchen. And so I do that, and I walk up those stairs into the kitchen, and, like, I don't even look up at Maegan. I just know she's standing across the island from me. And as soon as I walk in, it's just, she's telling me how upset she is, how angry she is, and why I should have, been calling her, and she's expressing how she's feeling, right? And like, I'm just sitting there, and just honestly, I'm just waiting for it to end. Like, I just wanted it to end so badly, and I could just walk away from that situation, but I just stood there, and it just carried on what was probably, only, a minute, but it felt like forever. And then finally, I look up from my feet, and I go to look at my wife, and, like, I don't see her, but what I see her standing there, but that's not what caught my attention. What I saw and what caught my attention was this thing behind her. It looked like a person, and I'll give as much detail as possible so that, like, Like it was real. And it's like this person thing standing behind her, and it just kind of was like, kind of like a grayish, but no face, almost kind of like smoke, to be honest, but in the shape of a person. And it's not like it spoke to me with a mouth, but I knew what it was communicating to me, and it just said to me, not much, but it just said to me, like, she's mine, right? And it's like the words that I remember was, I have my teeth in her. And so, like, that was not something that I was prepared for. Nothing I had even considered as being possible outside of a movie. And, like, I was terrified. And so, like, I sat there and I see this thing, and like I just turn around and walk back down the stairs, and Megan's still talking, and like I'm just like, well, I can't do this. I don't know what's going on. And so like I just go downstairs and sit on the couch in our basement, and I go through these phases of confusion and just having no idea what it was that I just saw, to like realizing like this is something that like is like spiritual and demonic. And like I might not have said those words, but I was like, this is real, but this is not something I can like choke this thing to death, which is probably what I would have enjoyed doing at the time. And so finally I was just like, well, I can't go back upstairs. And so I called Blake and I called Greg, and I was like, y'all need to come over to my house because I've got a problem and I don't know what to do. And so Greg and Blake came over to my house, and I remember Blake saying to me later, had this been anybody else, he wouldn't have believed him. Not because I was just incredibly trustworthy, but because like this was not a conversation piece. This was not something we talked about. These guys had not even taught on spiritual gifts or spiritual warfare in the way that they do now, right? And so like I told them exactly what I just told you, and like I remember both of them being like, what? And
I'm just going to be honest. I was terrified the whole ride over.
yeah.
Like, I was shaking. I was like, I'm going because he's my friend, but we might all die. I don't know.
Well, the reality is I think that we all knew that there was something incredibly demonic going on in my home, and none of us really knew what to do or say. But I do remember there was a lot of praying that happened. And Greg looked at me, and the thing that I remember, that like the message that was communicated to me by these guys was, and men, husbands especially, like hear me right now. He said, you need to take authority as the priest of your home right now. And in the name of Jesus, you need to go run this thing off. And again, at the time, I was like, what does that mean? Like I don't understand what it means to take authority as a priest. I'm not Catholic. I can't be a priest. Like, these are thoughts that are going through my head. But that was what I had. That was what I had to work with at the time. But it was true. Mm-hmm. It was absolutely true. And so I walked back into my house, and I didn't even believe the words that I was saying at first. By this time, Maegan had moved out of the kitchen, and she was taking a shower. That'll be significant here in a second. But, I started walking around my house. I didn't even believe what I was saying, but I just walked into every room, every threshold, every window, and I would just pray, like, if there's anything that is not of the Lord, in the name of Jesus, you do not have permission to be here. If there's anything that is not good and holy, in the name of Jesus, you do not have permission to be here. And, like, I just prayed this over and over, and, like, at the time, like, it just felt like I don't even believe what I'm saying. Like, I don't see this thing following me around anymore. Like, never seen anything like it since. But you know what's real. And so I just said this over and over until like I started to kind of feel like something's happening. I feel like what I'm saying actually matters, even though like I don't feel this incredible sense of authority. And so I ended up, one of the other things I told Greg was like, he told me, or Blake that told me was like, you need to tell Maegan what you saw and what you experienced. And like, I was like, well, that's a horrible idea. Because in my head was the enemy speaking lies. And I said, if I tell Maegan, she's going to look at me and tell me I'm being a drama queen, that I'm exaggerating, that I just don't want to hear where she's at, and I can't just be with her and her feelings, and that she was going to totally reject me. And so the advice that I got, though, was that, no, you need to go and share this with Maegan. And so as she was getting out of the shower, I walked into the bathroom, and I sat down, and like the best way I could at the time, I expressed to her what happened and what I saw. And totally expecting her to reject me, she just breaks down, starts crying, and looks at me, and like it was in that moment that I realized, and she told me, she's like, I've been feeling this for so long, and I have felt so alone, and I have not known what to do with it. And that was when I realized, like, oh, that's what being the priest of your home means. That's what walking in authority means. Because I had left my wife on her own to deal with the spiritual warfare, to deal with this thing that had gotten a foothold in our home because of our own sinful nature, our own depravity, our own mistakes that we had made, and a lack of repentance and turning and pursuing the Lord at the time, that we were just so fixated on wanting a child rather than being fixated on Him and His presence and giving Him glory and worshiping Him regardless of what our circumstances were or how we felt about things. And so it was in that moment that I realized I had kind of abandoned her to fend for herself.
Yeah. I hope you guys can see, like, you could see even in Maegan's reaction as he's telling the story, like, how incredibly painful this story is. Yeah. But the reason they're here telling you this story is because they know how it ends. They know there's still things that they're working through to this day, but that they're not defined by those things. There's been a lot of good that's come out of the past few years. And did you have anything you wanted to add to that part, or do you feel like you covered it fairly well?
Yeah, I think Zach covered it well when he said that I had been I knew all along that that's what was going on. I didn't really know that it was like what to call it or how to name it, but like I knew. The sick part was that a part of me was perfectly fine with it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's just how deep his teeth really were sunk into me, because I was just perfectly fine with them being there.
Yeah. From my perspective, when I show up to this house, I'm like, I don't want to walk in this house. And I never did walk in the house. I stayed in the garage. But, Zach tells the story pretty strong now. No offense, but Zach was a whimpering coward when I showed up. And I say that not to be mean to him, but to stress to you guys just how fearful he was. I mean, he's crying. He's just talking and sharing and not knowing what to do. And I'm just there as a friend. Greg's the only one who has any background in any kind of theology that would handle that. I was not prepared for that. But, he did. And he went by himself. Like, we didn't go in with him. We left. And he went in and he took those things to the Lord, and he took a step the enemy would never want him to take, which was that confession to his wife, that opening of a door to a conversation, that vulnerability that he had to express. That was him taking away a foothold in that moment. And so you see, and now these stories don't always go this way, at least this dramatic, for lack of better words. But they can. And the effect in your life is still the same, whether or not you ever see something. Like if you're just riddled with anger or, frustration, bitterness, envy, jealousy, like you have idols in your life, like whatever it is, like if you have those things dwelling in your life and you allow them to stay and you allow them to fester, you are literally giving residence to the enemy in your life. And we can go into more detail of what that means in another time, but I do want to kind of redeem the story a little bit. So we come through that season. That season was not over right then. Actually, I'm pretty sure, I left, and then you guys, didn't you call us back that night? You called us with our wives back, and we went over there and prayed, and I was like walking in, looking around, like, because seriously, guys, I was naive. I didn't know what the heck I was getting into, but we prayed, and things went well, and even Maegan, I remember you confessing things and apologizing for things that night and stuff, and so over the next few years, it was still hard. There were still a lot of hard moments. It did actually get worse before it got better. But it was the beginning of a process, and there was kind of a moment, I guess for you, really, where you felt like you were finally set free from those things. Do you want to kind of share some of that for just a few minutes?
Yeah, I think the night that you're even talking about, something happened even prior to that led up to being able to finally lay that all down. And I think it's necessary to share that just again, because just as much as the enemy was pursuing me, Jesus was also pursuing me 10 times harder. And I didn't know that because I didn't know him. But thank God he did it. He showed himself to me in a way that he knew I would listen. But it's a long story short, but I just got a random message one day from a friend that I had not talked to since high school. Actually, a friend that I wasn't even that close to. But I knew she knew the Lord, and I knew she was close to the Lord. So again, I trusted her wisdom. And she messaged me, and she just laid out a picture of what was actually a real scenario a week prior. And she described the situation as if she was in the room with me. So Zach and I, again, we weren't able to get pregnant after our miscarriage, even 2 years later. Like it took forever. And every month went by that, another negative test, I had to see another negative test. I was just like having to relive that pain all over again. And so there was a day that I was so angry, I was literally on the bathroom floor just screaming out to God and pounding my fist on the floor. And she said that she was in the room with us, that Jesus was in the room with me, and he was behind me, and he was holding me, and he was crying with me. And so in that moment, that was what I think, that theology that I talked about that was wrong, that's what helped me seek the true theology of Jesus and what his love actually does look like. And so once I finally was like, oh, I think I want to try to learn who Jesus is, I started reading my Bible again. I started praying again. I started actually like opening my heart up again, basically. But everything was still a struggle. We ended up getting pregnant with Eliza.
Praise God for that.
Yes, we did.
They're having to look over their shoulder because she's sitting right over there.
Yes,
so
there she is. Yes, we did end up getting pregnant 2 years later. Actually, right after I had finally developed a really good relationship with Jesus, so much so that I finally was just like, give me Jesus. Like, I will be fine if you never give me a child. I just want more of you. I remember that night, and then literally like a week later, I'm pregnant with Eliza. And so, of course, I still was struggling because now that I had that child, I did not want to lose her. I did not want to let her go. So I was consumed with anxiety the whole pregnancy. Even after pregnancy, it got really bad, really, really bad. My anxiety was totally out of control. I remember we had to go to the hospital a couple of times, and that just confirmed I have no control over what's going to happen to this child. And I don't know what I would ever do without her, kind of thing. But I got to the point where it was like debilitating. Like the anxiety was just so debilitating. Finally, Blake came over one day, and all I remember him saying is like, you know, I love you, Maegan, and we want to help you in whatever way that we can. And I had never like received love in a way from another human being outside of like Zach or my mom or my dad, you know, like family. But like to see a friend who cared so much about the pain that I was going through, and to be willing to come over and to like just sit with me and just hear me out and like talk to me about that kind of stuff. It was like a real life picture of like Jesus. And so one day at church, I sat down on a Wednesday night, just a random Wednesday night. I didn't even go to this Wednesday night service intending on doing this, but I ended up in the hot seat one day, and I asked for prayer over the debilitating anxiety. And another thing, though, was the eating disorder was also like a hit or miss. Like if I had a cheat day, I was probably going to throw up that day. Like it was, again, one of those things that was still kind of in my life. I thought I had control over it, kind of thing. But it was also one of those things that like I was so ready to be done with. And so finally I sat down in that hot seat and I just asked for that prayer. I asked for I asked for other people in my life to cover me in that prayer, and to like, it was also one of those things where I finally realized that, hey girl, that I didn't have to, like I was trying so hard to do this stuff on my own, and then I had all of these other people that were here to help me do it. And I don't remember the prayer specifically that you prayed, Blake, but I do remember, like, I think it was Blake and someone else, like during the prayer, just holding my hands up so that I could receive the prayers. And as just an act of like, I think it was Aaron holding Moses's hands up as an act of just, you know, whenever you're too tired, I've got you. I can hold this up for you. And it was there that I was delivered from the eating disorder, from the anxiety, the debilitating kind anyway. I still struggle sometimes, like Blake's terms. But it's not to the point where like I don't go to the Father every time. It's yes, I still have anxiety, but I handle it the right way. I handle it with my spiritual armor this time. I don't feel like I have everything I need to be able to do that, because I don't. It's with him and the armor that he's given me, the tools that he's given me to fight that anxiety, to fight the enemy, that I now, whenever I do feel that anxiety, I literally, in my head, like, I rebuke that. Like, I say that every single time I experience it. And it's working so far. So.
Yeah.
I do want to say, just for me to kind of put a cap on, you know, like I said, things did get better or worse before they got better. But, you know, I cannot express enough how incredibly important it is that you guys fight tooth and nail for this, right? For community, for people around you, like-minded people that you are known to. And we did a series on being fully known, and like that stuck with me. It's like, be known to people so that they can see these things in you, so they can speak life into you, so that they can, you know, tell you the truth when the enemy's whispering lies, right? And for me, you know, I think that is why the Lord has stirred in me such a desire to connect with you guys, especially like younger guys, is because I know how critical it was when I walked through that season that like I had Blake, like that I had somebody that was going to listen to me, that was going to speak life into me, that was not going to tell me what I wanted to hear, but that was going to tell me truth regardless. And like that was life-saving for me, right? So like I know that, and it's why I want to know Braden. It's why I want to no Jameson, and why I told you to freaking be here tonight, right? It's like all of you guys. That's why it's why I freaking come give you a hug every now and then, because you look like you need one. But like, I love you guys, and like, I know how huge and important it was for me, right, to have, man, Christian, I see you. How important it was for me to have that, and how critical it is that you guys fight for that. Like, these relationships that you're building in this room might save your life one day. And it's only by the power of the Holy Spirit of these people speaking life into you every time you sit in that hot seat, every time you pray, every time people come around you and pray when you're dealing with something, right? That's the Lord. That is spiritual warfare. That is you guys engaging in spiritual warfare. You don't see no smoke figure stand up. That was the Lord's grace and mercy showing me that this is real, right? And that when you see your friend experiencing this burden, like for me, that let me know, okay, no, this is what's going on. It doesn't mean they're necessarily being demonized, but it does mean that like the enemy is at work. The enemy is whispering lies. He is doing what he is doing. He is deceiving and lying, and he is seeking to destroy. So the community that you guys are building, the relationships that you guys are building here, like, cherish that. Fight for it. Like Blake said when he started, this unity is going to be something that comes up. You get to choose. You get to choose whether or not that happens, right? You get to choose. And spiritual warfare is about knowing what it is that you're up against. When you start to feel jealousy or resentment or anger or unforgiveness, know that that person may have made a mistake, but you get to choose whether or not you let that linger. You get to choose whether or not you forgive, right? So don't let that happen. Don't let it linger. Don't let it fester. Squash it. Kill it.
Any last bit of thoughts?
I love Jesus very much now. I love him so, so much.
Yeah. Okay. Well, can we just take a second and show them some honor, guys? Just for being willing. So, no, you don't have to get off. So, again, this was just to show you guys, like, the reality of spiritual warfare in your life, things maybe you didn't even realize was spiritual warfare. I was going to do a Q&A, but it went longer than I expected. So if you got Q&A, you can Q&A directly with them. But thank you guys for listening. Hopefully it helps. Come with questions if you need anything. And I'm trying to think if there's anything we need to say before we wrap up. Anybody think of anything? Don't forget to be here Easter. We'll be here next Sunday night too, so be here for that. Good? All right. Love you guys.